be back. I hope that everybody had a really nice summer and had a chance to disconnect a little bit, had a chance to maybe experience some relaxation as well as some flow. And so that's what we're going to talk about a little bit today within the realm of being able to tap into your ability to challenge yourself, but achieve a state of balance, which leads to a greater state of well-being. And so what I mean by that is every year, anybody who has tapped into our presentations knows that we have done a variety of different themes of presentations. Last year, we did compassion and connection and organized all of our presentations around those different areas. This year, we decided to tap into an area called flow. And this is based on research from 30, 35 years ago by a psychologist by the name of Mahawi Csikszentmihalyi, which took me about 5 years just to learn how to pronounce his name. But anybody who's not read any of the research on flow, we would really encourage you to get into our presentation series this year, because each of our presentations is going to look at ways that human beings can achieve a state of well-being and increase their level of happiness by learning how to gather their attention and focus and tap into different traits and capabilities that they have that lead them into a place of being able to achieve goals more effectively and to be able to achieve a better sense of balance. And we particularly wanted to talk about this because over the last many years, there has been so much in the news, so much that we have heard about, obviously through COVID, all the stress that caused in everybody's life. And then you couldn't possibly pick up a newspaper or listen to a newscast and not hear about some area of distress in our world, particularly with children, looking at child development and adolescent development, all of the research coming out about the anxiety issues that kids are experiencing, the stress issues that kids are experiencing. And so we decided to try to look at this from a different perspective this year and really come up with research that shows ways that human beings can actually approach a state of happiness and well-being more effectively. And so each one of our presentations that we're going to have over the course of this year is going to tap into a different way that we as adults and in helping our children can really enable the ability to achieve this experience of flow. And so we're going to talk today a little bit about flow. And then in 2 weeks, Ethan Bork, one of our psychotherapists here, is going to tackle a much broader analysis of the research on flow and how it ties into happiness and well-being. And then after that, we're going to have a presentation on how flow can help combat anxiety. And we're going to have presentation on achieving flow through holiday periods. And so each one of these is going to look at this from a different angle. And today we're going to look at it from the angle of how to help our children and help ourselves take the flow that we hopefully achieved over the summer, carried into the school year, and how we can help our kids get set up for success. And we, as the adults in their life, get set up for success as well. So by way of a delayed introduction, my name is Chris Bogart. I'm the executive director and a clinical psychologist at Sasko River Center. And then, at least on my screen, the next person there is Samantha. If you could introduce yourself.
Sorry, I'm just going between screens right now. Hi, I'm Samantha Gadsden. I'm an executive functions and learning coach here at Sasko.
And Allie.
Hi, I'm Muzzio, an occupational therapist. I'm excited to be presenting with Chris and Sam for the second year in a row, and thank you for joining us.
So if you could flip to the next slide, Samantha. Just as a way of further introducing the concept of flow, the best moments in our lives usually occur when a person's body or mind is stretched to its limits in a voluntary effort to accomplish something difficult and worthwhile. And that is what we call flow. So basically, what that somewhat complex set of words means is that human beings have the capacity to be able to achieve this sense of balance and well being by setting up goals that create challenges in our life that might be a little bit beyond what we've been able to achieve before. But by setting up these challenges and by setting up a series of different steps to move towards these challenges, when you get in that state of moving towards that challenge, you can create this sense of inner calm and inner well-being, and it increases happiness. And there's an incredible body of research over the last 35 years on exactly what's happening in the body and the brain during these periods of time. But in brief, what the research has been able to show is that by systematically putting into your life different periods of time where you are focused on a challenge and making progress towards this challenge, and you've balanced your effort level with your skill level to be able to make progress towards this goal, you're able to increase your level of life satisfaction. You're able to improve your emotion regulation. You're able to increase your problem solving skills, improve your creativity, reduce stress, reduce anxiety, all of these incredible research studies that show over and over again that by learning how to better detect areas of your life that you are interested in making progress on, creating this level of challenge beyond what you're comfortable with in terms of it being too easy, but also not too hard, kind of finding that sweet spot that allows us to achieve flow. And so if you apply that into the world of children and the world of learning and social development, what we can have a door into is a way of helping our kids to be more successful in school, be more successful socially, be more successful in understanding how their body works by helping them to understand this concept of flow and how it plays into setting challenges and being able to make progress towards those challenges. So that's what we're going to talk about today. We click to the next slide. I'll show you a brief agenda here. So we're going to do a little introduction to flow and talk about how flow has a connection into something we've talked about a lot in previous presentations, the development of executive functions. And I'll go into a little bit about what executive functions are for any of you that might not be fully versed in that area. We're going to talk a little bit about how flow helps us to balance our emotions and our energy level and give us the ability to focus on our goals. Then I'm going to turn it over to Samantha, who's going to talk about this from the perspective of how we can help kids improve their approach to learning. And then Allie's going to talk about how flow can be tied into sensory regulation, sensory development, and really look at helping our kids to be able to become much more in tune with what their body's telling them. Then we'll wrap up with some good readings to suggest for you and have potentially a little bit of time at the end for some questions and answers. So hopefully that is what you signed on for this morning. And hopefully you're able to walk away with a few ideas about how this can apply to your own life as well as your kids' lives. So if we click to the next slide there. So how do we create flow? And I've already touched on this a little bit, but flow is defined as an enjoyable and energizing psychological state of concentrated engagement. What was interesting for me is I had read this book by Mihaly, and I'm not even going to try to pronounce his last name again. I read the book on flow that came out in 1990, back pretty much around that period of time. I'm giving away a little bit about my age, but I read this back in the early 1990s. Then I put it aside and it didn't really tap into it again until over this past summer when we were planning this presentation series. And when I had read it before, what clicked in my mind about what I thought flow was basically a state of mindfulness, just being able to learn how to sit and let feelings move through you and allow your body and your mind to be as present as possible. And certainly there is a component to flow that is related to mindfulness and the ability to stay present and not get lost in what am I going to do next week, and not get lost in, oh boy, I wish I had accomplished this back in July or whatever. But being able to stay present, that is definitely a part of flow. But flow is a much more active and engaged process that is what opens our door to a lot of energy that we as human beings don't even realize that we have inside ourselves. And so what flow theory has suggested, and what the research has really supported, is that students, people attempting to learn new information, experience optimal learning when they approach tasks that are slightly above their comfort level, but are in line with what their skills have set them up to be able to accomplish. And so it's this stasis that you reach when you have something that turns on your nervous system because you're interested in accomplishing it. You're interested in challenging yourself. You've got enough skills to be able to go into it. So it's not me trying to sit down and learn how to do brain surgery, but it might be me sitting down and taking something that I learned in terms of uh, performing psychological tests with children, and take it to a place where I might be introducing a new test, a new set of skills that take my prior skills and then apply them in a way that allows me to move towards a goal. And so when we're talking about a middle school student or a high school student, what we want to try to help them to be able to learn is that when they approach homework or when they approach a new set of skills, and they're able to look at these skills in isolation and say, okay, these are skills that I have a little bit of knowledge of, but I want to learn more about it. And when they're able to step into that somewhat uncomfortable space of, I don't know if I'm going to be able to accomplish this immediately, but I'm going to take the skills as well as my executive functions that I developed previously and apply them in a systematic way, that opens up their brain to so much greater learning. And flow is maximized when the learner feels in control of what they're learning and has a challenge that is interesting to them, but not overwhelming to them. And so what we want to do with students is constantly help them learn how to bring themselves back into a comfortable place in terms of what they feel that they can accomplish. And we can do that best through the executive function system, because it's the executive function system of the brain that helps them to be able to take tasks, break them down into their parts, take tasks and learn what they're going to need to approach first and prioritize, and then be able to approach second and then third and fourth, so that they can do it in a very sequential and a very strategic fashion, so that they can be able to move themselves towards their goal. When we put learners in situations where they feel overwhelmed and out of control, it just shuts their brain down and they're not able to make progress in terms of achieving their goals. And they're not going to be able to open up that door to that psychological and physical state in their brain that we call flow. If you could just flick to the next slide there, Samantha. So let's take a little bit of a right turn into the area of executive function. So as I said, this is something we've talked about in a lot of previous presentations. And at Sasko River, we very frequently go back to executive functions, whether we're talking about learning, whether we're talking about emotional health, whether we're talking about social development, whether we're talking about sensory development. All of our different providers from a variety of different clinical backgrounds will go back to executive functions, because it's the executive function center of the brain that is constantly called on to be able to approach a problem and break it down into its parts and come up with a plan for dealing with it. So these are brain pathways in the front part of our brain and what's called our prefrontal cortex that give us the skills needed to help you stop take a step back, regulate your behavior, your emotions, and your thoughts. And one of the best ways to think of it is through the metaphor of what a conductor does in an orchestra. And so you could have a philharmonic orchestra made up of all of the absolute best musicians of the world. You could have the best violinists and the best percussion section and the best horn section and all of these incredible musicians. But when they go to play music, if they don't have somebody there to organize them and to tell them when to come online, when to increase their pace, when to increase their volume, if they don't have that conductor to weave it all together, it's just noise. And that's what the conductor does for an orchestra, and it's what our executive function system does for our brain. What the executive function system is, it's our conductor or our coaching staff that allows our brain to say, okay, right now you need verbal skills. Now you need sensory modulation. Now you need to plan ahead. It's that executive function system that's the master conductor of all of the different brain pathways that allows us to accomplish different tasks. And so to the extent that we can tap into that executive function system and learn how to turn it on more effectively and plan our way through different situations, that is what's going to open the door to learning, and it's going to open the door to that state of flow that I've talked about. So if we click to the next slide. So stronger executive functions means more access to flow. And flow in learning creates greater alignment between your your student's skill level and the challenges that they take on. These are systems that play off of each other. So the more our executive functions kick into action and help us to plan, regulate, strategize, that opens up a learner to be able to approach a challenge or a task in a more proactive way, and then to be able to step into that energy state that allows them to be able to accomplish things much more efficiently, as well as achieve that sense of well-being and that sense of calm. And the next slide, I think, will help this come full circle for you. So what this table shows is where we want to try to help students get to is this upper right corner of flow and control. And so on the I believe that would be the x-axis. On the x-axis, you see skill level from a student who may have low skill level in a certain area all the way up to a high skill level in a certain area. And then on the y-axis, you can see the challenge level. What we want to do with every task that is presented to a child, whether they're learning to read, write, do math, problem solve, make inferences, all of these different things, we want to try to come up with material or tasks that they have a relatively moderate middle of the road up to high skill level for, but also a relatively moderate to high challenge level. If the challenge level is too low, what ends up happening is kids get bored, they turn off to it, they don't have interest in it. If the challenge level is too high, it creates anxiety. I'm not going to be able to do this. It starts turning on that part of the brain that leads the person to think negatively about themselves and to have difficulty focusing on what the task is. So what we want to try to do is achieve this upper right corner where a student is able to achieve a place of being focused on the task, but also being challenged by the task. They feel in control, but they also know that they need to really focus on it to be able to make progress. And so this is, as an educator, as a parent, as a clinician, what we always want to be thinking about is how we can try to enhance the student's ability to understand the idea that the skill level needs to be something that we give them enough skill level to be able to approach it, but it needs to be something that's slightly above what they're comfortable with. So the challenge needs to be there as well. And that's what opens the door to this psychological energy state, this brain state that allows them to really accomplish much greater goals for themselves. And then the next slide is just a little brain diagram that shows all the different parts of the brain that come online when we align our executive function system with our flow system. The prefrontal cortex is that place in the brain that is responsible for executive functions, that allows us to plan ahead, allows us to focus, allows us to control our impulses, but it can't do it on its own. It has to tap into these other parts of our brain that are able to allow us to lower our emotional reactivity, be able to think in a more calm fashion and be able to tap into what we've learned previously. So all of these other parts of the brain are also important. This back part of the brain is what taps into our visual system. This temporal lobe, mid part of the brain, is what taps into our emotions as well as our ability to learn language and use language. This upper part of the system is the parietal lobe that taps into all the sensory systems of the brain. This bottom part of the brain, the cerebellum, is what taps into motor skills. And what we find when we're able to teach kids how to access flow and teach kids how to use their executive function system, what it does is it turns off a lot of the negative thinking that very often happens in learning, where kids feel like they're not able to handle a task. It allows them to be able to tap into higher levels of energy. It tends to increase their reward center of the brain so that they start to feel a greater level of satisfaction for what they're able to complete. So the research has been able to show that there truly are brain changes that occur when a person's energy level, skill level, challenge level are aligned in that place of heightened challenge, but also within their skill level. Okay. Couple more slides and I'm going to turn it over to Samantha. So for you as a parent, when you're thinking about how to help your child move towards flow, move towards using their executive function system, these are just some basic things that basically set the environment up, set their day-to-day life up in a way that increases their likelihood of being available for learning, being available for achieving a higher level of success. And so having a daily schedule is critical. So during the summer, many of us have just kind of abandoned the idea of what the bedtime is, what the wake up time is, when dinner times are, when study times are. This is the period of time in late August, early September that we want to shift back into a much more regular schedule for all of those different activities. And even on the weekend, I'm not saying that your kids have to get up at 6:15 on the weekends, but you don't want to necessarily just abandon a schedule on the weekend as well, or else what happens in the brain is the child has to shift back and forth between multiple schedules, and they have a hard time getting into a greater state of control that then sets them up for better learning. And so you really want to be mindful of having a daily schedule for meals, for exercise, for sleep, for homework, all of these different pieces. And that's why I also say have a weekly family meeting, because in that weekly family meeting, that's when you should pull out the calendar. You should really look at what's coming up on Tuesday. Okay, Johnny's got soccer practice. And on Thursday, Billy's got performance. And grandmom's coming to town at the end of the week. And all of these things, it should go onto a family calendar. You should review that on a weekly basis. It doesn't have to be a long family meeting, but having that family meeting sets your kids up for that tendency to be able to stop, think ahead, plan more effectively about what they need to do to make sure that they're able to meet all of the requirements in their day. Set up family quiet time, turn off all the devices, have a little bit of quiet time that is screen-free, just to be able to help the brain relax. We have so much research over the last 5 to 10 years that shows that all of the devices, the iPads, the iPhones, all of the different devices that we tap into create a lot of noise in our brain. And what we need is scheduled in quiet time where you can bring your brain down to a level that you're then going to be more effective when you have to turn on and focus and challenge yourself. Have a little bit of time to focus on what's going well. We all have a tendency to be plugged into the things that aren't working in our lives. And so try to turn into a little bit of time to practice gratitude. And we're going to have a whole presentation on a gratitude practice and the impact that has on mental health, but try to focus on positives. Start your dinner meet, your meal in the evening by saying what went well today, not what didn't go well or where were the stresses or things like that. Let's all come up with something that went well. And being able to just cue kids to be able to focus on that can help turn their brain on in a more effective way. Have time for socializing with peers. When kids do come to you with a situation where they're feeling overwhelmed or totally unable to handle a challenge, empathize with what they're going through, tell them you understand, yeah, that is stressful, but you got this. I have faith. You're going to be able to handle that. That balance between empathizing with your child's worries and giving them the sense that they've got this and that they're able to handle it, they've got the skill set, is that magical balance that you want as a parent to be able to steer your child to their own inner resources to cope with stress more effectively. Take opportunities for you to get to know the teacher, but not in a way that you're burdening them with emails and all of this stuff on a minute-to-minute basis, but get to know the teacher. And once they've had a chance to learn more about your child, then later in September, have a little bit of a moment where you give them other cues on what tends to turn your child on in a class, what tends to help them focus, what types of stylistic things might lead them to experience greater stress. And then keeping your home environment as organized as possible is critical for your children to feel in control as well. And then my final slide, I just touch on these 4 things because they are the basis for kids feeling balance, feeling in control, and then that's going to help them be a better learner, be more effective socially, be more effective emotionally, make sure there's laughter in your day-to-day life, make sure that they have regular sleep times, make sure that there is time built in for play, turning off all the devices and getting outside, being with their friends and being in that beautiful natural environment to do a lot of outdoor activities and play activities, and make sure that you have routines built in, because that predictability is what helps them to stay greater in balance and access their executive functions. So I'm going to turn it over to Samantha.
Thank you so much. Can we hear me?
Yep.
Great. Okay. So thank you, Chris. I'd like everyone to think back to June. I'd like you to think back to when school first got out. You may have had some trouble kind of getting into the summer mode. It may have been so different, and the timing of things was so off the wall that it took some time to feel comfortable. Well, now we're doing the opposite. And so now we've gone from summer mode and we're moving into learning mode. And so, what that means is that you need to anticipate that change, and you can put some things in place to help yourself and help your children to make that transition more comfortably, and allow more places for flow. So, today we're going to be talking about some of the things that Chris mentioned in more detail: the idea of planning, of having routines, of staying organized, of being proactive. What we're really talking about is we're talking about executive function skills and how we use them both in the classroom and in our daily life. So the first thing that we're going to talk about is schedules. Life is really, really busy, and it's never been busier for our children than it is right now. And so because of that, because we're contending with appointments and sports practices and all sorts of things, we need to help our children make sense of their days and weeks. This is not always natural for children. Oftentimes, children really need that support to help them visualize what their week looks like. So for older children, we sometimes think they don't need this, and that's not the case. Middle schoolers, even high schoolers, still need a bit of help, sometimes understanding how the flow of the week is going to work for them. Just depends on your child. So the way to work on this is to have great communication. So this could be as easy as a check-in at breakfast on Monday morning to say what's coming up for the week. It could be a family meeting, as Chris mentioned. For older children, you can do multiple days in a row. Here's this, the whole flow of the week. For younger children, you might want to break it down even more. So maybe just today, and then focus on tomorrow, the next day. It just depends what works best for your children, but really helping them to understand the flow of the week even kind of zooming out to understanding the flow of the month can be really, really helpful. It also helps with planning. All right, so if we're going to talk about schedule, we also need to talk about routines. Now, routines are the things that we do habitually. We do them every day usually. We often talk about morning routines and evening routines. Uh, these are things like the things you do every night before your head hits the pillow, or for a morning routine, all the things you do from the time you get up until you get out the door. Some children will rebel against this. They don't necessarily want to have to decide what they're going to do every day, but it is really important to have routines. It's important for children. It's also really important for adults because routines are predictable, and predictability makes us feel safe. We are able to anticipate what's coming up, which means that we can be prepared for school, we can be prepared for sports, we can be prepared for all the things that happen often. And so this allows us to be more efficient in getting out the door or going to bed, and also way more productive. And all of this in the end leads to lower stress. And we know, as Chris said, lower stress equals better executive functions. I'm sure anyone can think about a day you were running late and you were running around the house looking for something or trying to get something finished. My guess is that your executive function skills were not firing on all cylinders. You may have had trouble with task initiation or starting things. You may have had trouble with emotional regulation. You may have found yourself having trouble making choices. So if we can keep the stress down in the morning, especially by having nice, solid routines, then it means a better start to the day for your children and frankly for you as well. All right. One of the biggest questions I get as an executive functions coach always has to do with organization. These tips I'm going to give you work all year long, but they're especially important right now because if your house is anything like my house, there is more coming in right now than there has been all summer. There are school supplies and there are handouts and there are activities that I need to put on the calendar. So there are all these things coming in and it can be a little bit overwhelming. So the very first thing is to give everything a home. Everything in your house needs a place to land. Now, I know this is hard, especially if you have young children, things travel all over the house, but if you can try to give everything a home, then that makes life a lot easier. Partially because when things don't have a home, they tend to float. And when things float, they get lost. And then we're looking for them. We're buying multiples of them. So if you can give things a home, it can make life a lot easier for everyone. Another tip is just to keep things where you use them. So for example, you may be thinking about your dining room. Maybe you have a lovely formal dining room, but maybe that's also where your children do their homework. If it is where they do their homework, that's where their school supplies should be. It does two things. Number one, it keeps things in the right place so that you're not looking for them. But it also means that your children can achieve that state of flow because they're not constantly looking for things and getting up and finding things. They're able to sit down, do their work, and get things done. Now, sometimes we end up keeping things in places that kind of seem a little bit counterintuitive. So for instance, a hairbrush, you often think maybe that goes in a bedroom or in the bathroom, but it might actually be a better idea in your house to keep the hairbrush by the front door because you brush your child's hair right before they go out the door each day. Whatever works for your family, but keep things where you use them to make life a little bit easier. Also, we're not just talking about physical objects, like I've mentioned. It also can be the tasks, the things that are more on the mental checklist. So having a planner of some sort is incredibly helpful. It can be digital, it can be paper, but it has a really great benefit as well that if you're open about this with your child, they'll see you modeling how you keep yourself organized. If you can show them, oh, I need to add that to my calendar, or oh, we should put that on the checklist. That's helping them to develop their own systems. Future you is probably my favorite thing in the entire world when working with my clients, also when working with my own children, and also for myself, which is current you, right now you, tends to want to take the easy way out. That is just how humans are. But if you can think about future you as a whole different person, as a friend, then you can think about ways that you can make future you's life easier. So I know future me probably doesn't want to run around looking for shoes in the morning. So current me might put my shoes by the front door so that they're there. I know my children, future them, doesn't necessarily want to pack their backpacks in the morning. And I certainly don't want to have to run around looking for books and things in the morning. So um, current me will put the books away so that future me can feel happy in the morning when everything is nice and calm. So help out future you and think about ways that you can do that to bring down the stress in your house in the morning. All right, so technology. It is so challenging. We know brain-wise, technology just sucks us in and it sucks up all of our time. Unfortunately, it is also really necessary. Even elementary school kids are using it for their academics. High school kids, middle school kids are using it for organization. They might use something like Schoology. They might use something like Google Classroom. And actually, these tools are great. Like, they have a lot of benefits. But they can also be really tricky because it opens the door to kind of losing track of our way and maybe ending up on a game, ending up on social media. So for you, as a parent, it's important to know the tech tools that your children are using. Make sure you understand what they're using so that that can help you to set clear limits so that you can help them to make good choices when they are using their screens and that you know why they're using them. But you are not alone in this. There is tech help. There are apps that are out there. They're always changing. It could be things like there are some that give you kind of gamify the idea of not being on your screen, so you can like grow a tree or something like that to try to keep you off screens. There are also things that you can use on your children's technology to help them maybe make some better choices as to how they're using their time. You can see what they're doing and you can help direct them in that way. Now, finally, as a parent, your children are off to school and you have a chance right now at the start of the school year to really be proactive in getting in front of things. The first thing is you don't need to have all the answers, but what can really help is to be curious and to ask questions. And then the most important part is to listen to the answers. So asking your children open-ended questions, things like, which classes are you most worried about? What did you struggle with last year? What would help make it easier this year? And then listen to their answers. Often you'll find that many of these answers are not related to content as much as they're related to their executive functions. And it may be that they had trouble prioritizing last year. It may be that it was hard for them to find their materials. They were always losing things. These are things that you can help them with, but if you start asking questions early, you're more likely to find them before they become a bit of a disaster mid-year. But also remember, you're not alone. There are advisors and teachers at school. You have a wonderful community there to help you. There are also outside sources like SASCO that can offer support. Because at the end of the day, what we are trying to do as parents is empower our children. We want them to feel good as a learner. We want them to feel like they're in that sweet spot between challenge and feeling comfortable, because that leads to confidence and flow and feeling really good. Part of that is we want them to be able to advocate for themselves to help get themselves into that place. So I'm going to leave you now and just say, have a great school year. I'm sure it will be wonderful. And I'm going to pass you on to Allie, who's going to talk to you all about the sensory aspects of school.
Thank you, Sam. So hello. Before we dive in, I just want to set stage for the discussion. So as an occupational therapist, my role is to support your child and family in their everyday activities, including navigating the school year and fostering success both academically and socially. So with that being said, one of the key approaches that we use in occupational therapy is the sensory integrative approach, which involves the understanding of how we process the 5 primary sensory systems in our everyday lives. However, there are also 2 lesser known sensory systems that we'll explore in our presentation, so just stay tuned. But to help us flow through this discussion, I would like to guide us through a brief mindfulness exercise. So this will engage all 7 of our senses and will only take a couple of minutes. So when you're ready, just please find a comfortable position, relax your body, and if you're comfortable, just gently close your eyes. So let's just begin by taking a deep breath. Feel the chair supporting you, the texture of your clothes, and the ground beneath your feet. Inhale the senses around you, whether fresh air or a subtle fragrance. Recall the taste of your morning drink lingering on your tongue. Listen to the quiet sounds of your environment, the hum of your device, distant noises, or your own breath. Now bring awareness to your body, noting the position of your hands and feet. Feel the subtle shifts as you adjust your balance and your posture. Notice any feelings of hunger, fullness, or general comfort or discomfort within your body. And just notice where that resonates. Gently rock your head side to side, forward and back, or just in a circular motion. And then finally, open your eyes slowly and take in the light and the colors around you. Inhale another deep breath, feeling fully present, balanced, and ready to continue. So thank you for participating in that brief mindfulness exercise. I hope you're feeling more ready and centered to dive into our next topic. So Sam, whenever you're ready, you can change the slide. Thank you. So now let's explore the two lesser known sensory systems. I mentioned that they play a crucial role in how children interact with their environment and regulate their behavior. The vestibular and proprioceptive systems are the two lesser known sensory systems we'll talk about today. But first, let's discuss the vestibular system. So this system is closely linked to an area of the brain that's called the reticular activating system, the RAS, which is involved in regulating arousal and energy levels. So children who have difficulties with vestibular processing often struggle with attention or may find it challenging to sit or stand still. This is because their brain's ability to manage sensory input from the movement and balance can impact their overall focus and behavior. It's located in the inner ear, controls balance and posture, and provides spatial orientation. And then next we have the proprioceptive system. This system helps us understand where our body is in space. And it can provide sensory input through both passive and active means. So for example, the calming effect of a gentle massage and let's say the invigorating feeling after you work out from exercising. They both provide proprioceptive input, but they're very different types of sensory feedback, both passive and active. So understanding these distinctions can help us tailor strategies to support our children in managing their sensory needs more effectively. And so both of these systems are essential for helping our children stay engaged and balanced in their daily lives, especially as they transition into the school year and become more into the school mode. And so by supporting their sensory systems, we can help our children improve their attention, their coordination, and overall comfort in various environments. And so we'll continue to explore how we can apply this understanding with practical strategies for our children and support them in their everyday lives. So whenever you're ready, Sam. Thank you. So let's move on to discuss sensory integration and processing. So our brains are constantly working to process the sensory information we receive from our environment and emit appropriate responses. And so sensory processing and integration, as defined by Jean Ayres, who is an influential figure in occupational therapy, refers to the organization of sensory input for meaningful use. Essentially, it's the process by which we receive sensory information, organize it, and use it to engage in everyday activities like cooking, writing, or playing for our kids. The quality of what we take in directly influences how we respond. What comes in dictates what comes out. And each person experiences a range of sensory processing and responds differently to various sensations on a daily basis. And so on the right of this slide, you'll see an image from Dr. Siegel's book I have right here, and it's also part of the the list of books we'll recommend. It's called The Whole Brain Child, and it represents how we flow through our everyday, or what Dr. Daniel Siegel likes to call it, the river well-being. And on two sides are extremes of chaos and rigidity, when there's too much control or not enough control. And so this represents when we're closer to the banks of both chaos and rigidity, we are furthest from sensory regulation and emotional and mental well-being. And the longer that we flow in this river of well-being, the more regulated that we may feel, and therefore will be more focused in the activities that we're engaging in. And so with that being said, while most of us are familiar with the 5 primary senses, right? Touch, taste, smell, sight, and hearing. Again, I just want to mention that the 2 senses also include vestibular and proprioceptive. And so these are all necessary for sensory processing and integration to be able to interpret and organize our senses for everyday use. And so in the upcoming slides, we'll focus on how each of these senses impact our daily activities and how we can support our children in navigating our sensory needs. And so on this slide, I want to introduce the pyramid of learning, which is a useful visual for understanding sensory processing. And so think of this pyramid as a way to conceptualize how higher level skills are built upon foundational sensory processing skills. Just as, let's say, the iceberg model helps us see how underlying factors impact visible factors, the pyramid of learning illustrates how sensory processing is foundational to more complex skills. At the base of the pyramid are our sensory processing abilities, and these foundational skills influence and support our ability to develop higher level skills, such as if you see academic performance, attention, coordination, and emotional regulation. And when we look at behaviors from this foundational standpoint, we understand everything affects different parts of the pyramid. It's important to recognize that all aspects of sensory processing are interconnected and not one system works alone or at once. This means that issues at one level can impact higher level skills and vice versa. So in other words, everything is connected in some way, and addressing sensory processing can have a ripple effect in various aspects on child's development. And by focusing on the base of the pyramid and providing our children regulating input through their daily lives, we can support them in building stronger skills and at higher levels. And so how does sensory impact learning? So now let's explore how sensory processing can impact various aspects to our children's learning. So sensory challenges can present in many ways, but today we'll focus on how these challenges specifically affect their academic performance. And so when it comes to attention, sensory processing can significantly impact a child's ability to pay attention. For instance, a child who is, let's say, over-responsive to sensory input might be easily distracted by it, while a child who is under-responsive might need additional movement to activate their sensory systems to stay engaged. Auditory and visual processing challenges can also affect focus, making it difficult for children to concentrate on tasks. The ability to remain seated requires both postural strength and a well-functioning vestibular system. Sensory processing issues that affect balance and posture can make it difficult for a child to stay still during their classroom activities. And organizational skills involve higher level cognitive functions, such as planning and executing tasks. So if a child is expanding their cognitive effort to manage and process sensory inputs, they may struggle with more complex tasks like organizing and executive functioning, as Chris mentioned. Sensory processing challenges can make it harder for children to manage their belongings and also complete their assignments effectively. And when it comes to visual focus or distractibility, children who are over-responsive to visual input might be constantly on alert for changes in their visual environment, leading to distractibility. So this heightened state of alertness can interfere with their ability to focus on the task at hand. And when it comes to fine motor skills, many academic activities like writing, coloring, cutting, and drawing rely on these fine motor skills. And sensory processing challenges can interrupt or impair these skills, requiring additional cognitive effort to perform these tasks that include hand-eye coordination, and precise movements. And so with that being said, understanding these impacts can help us better support our children in developing the skills they need for academic success and to be in school mode. So let's continue by looking at practical strategies to address these sensory processing challenges. And so on this slide, we're focusing on sensory behaviors that are important to watch for. So these behaviors can significantly impact a child's ability to engage effectively in their learning environment. So it's essential to differentiate between sensory preferences and sensory needs. Children with sensory processing challenges have specific sensory needs that must be met to help them regulate and function effectively. They often struggle to manage needs independently and may require more support. In contrast, children with sensory preferences can manage daily challenges without extra sensory input, though it can be quite taxing and draining for them. So children with sensory processing challenges often use significant cognitive effort to cope with their sensory experiences. And this additional cognitive load can put them at a disadvantage, making it harder for them to focus on academic tasks and participate fully in classroom activities. And by recognizing these behaviors and understanding the difference between sensory preferences and needs, we can better support our children in managing their sensory experiences and enhancing their engagement and performance in the classroom. So let's move forward to discuss specific strategies for addressing these sensory behaviors. On this slide, we're focusing on what a sensory break is comprised of and how to effectively implement them. So sensory breaks can be done individually or with siblings, and the frequency of these breaks are more important than their duration. Regular, shorter breaks are often more beneficial than infrequent, longer ones. So I recommend incorporating sensory breaks into your existing home routines to make them more practical and consistent. Pay attention to the balance between, let's say, seated time and movement breaks, as they both play important roles in the child's sensory integration too. So also take a holistic approach when analyzing your child's work environment or where they do homework. Factors including lighting, noise, decorations, and also the seat that they're in can impact their sensory processing. Adjusting these environmental elements can help create a more conducive environment for their learning and their regulation. And with that being said, also timing is crucial with sensory breaks. So consider how preparation activities and the timing of the sensory breaks can enhance their effectiveness. For example, maybe before going to school in the morning and waiting for the bus, or right before bed. So through integration of sensory breaks into our children's daily routines can support their ability to manage sensory preferences and experiences and improve their overall engagement and performance. Now, next we'll discuss specific strategies and activities to use during these sensory breaks to best support your child's sensory needs, which is now the exciting part, the activities for the sensory breaks. We covered the fundamentals of sensory processing, the identified challenges, and discussed when to use sensory breaks. So now let's dive into what you can actually do during these breaks to support your child's sensory needs. So the goal is to focus on the three main sensory systems: the vestibular system, which provides movement, the proprioceptive system, which provides body awareness and is more grounding, and respiration, which is also providing some breath control and mindfulness. And while incorporating other sensory systems can be beneficial, targeting these systems will give you the most effective results. And so here are the activities we'll go through. I'll just list them. If you have any questions, just please let me know. So the first, you want to start with vestibular. So they'll help with balance and spatial orientation. One of my favorite vestibular activities is completing some yoga. Yoga poses help with body awareness and movement. So feel free to do, let's say, tree pose, downward dog, cat and cow. These help invert our head and provide, again, input to the vestibular system. Like we did earlier, we did neck stretches. So moving your neck forward and back, side to side, or just in a circular motion can help, release tension and also provide some inner ear stimulation. You can also do some toe touches to get that head inversion too, and raising your hands up to the sky, and any kind of jumping. So if you and your child want to do some kind of obstacle course, or if there's any way you can transition them by hopping from one place to the other, that provides them some vestibular input. And then next we have proprioception. So these activities will provide deep pressure and muscle feedback. So right now during the presentation, I was holding this heavy weight ball to provide some calming input to, provide me some grounding and mindfulness. So during the presentation, so I love using this as a calming tool. There's also some small fidgets. So you can also have these. You can also do some hand or body squeezes, which also offers calming pressure to the body. So giving yourself a good squeeze and gradually going down your arms or just down your legs too. Progressive muscle relaxation is also another activity you can do and helps relaxing muscles and improve that body awareness. A chair push-up. So if you notice that your child is seeking some movement or is just feeling a little fidgety, you can have them push up on the armrests of the chairs and just lifting their bottom from the chair and see how long they can hold it for. And then again, maybe doing some stretches in the chair too to provide some muscle feedback. And then thirdly, respiration and breathing activities. These again help with self-regulation, mindfulness, and grounding. One of my favorite activities is blowing bubbles or doing a bubble mountain. So you can put some soap and water together in a cup and then blow through a straw to make a bubble mountain. You can also do some belly breathing. So putting an item or an object on your child's stomach while laying down and seeing that object rise as they breathe in and out. And then one of my favorite breathing activities that I like to do with children is called volcano breathing. So inhale deeply while raising your arms above your head like a volcano, and then exhale and erupt very forcefully and letting out any kind of stress that they have. I like to do that about 3 to 5 times. So feel free to explore these activities and tailor them to fit your child's needs. Feel free to move on, Sam, whenever you're ready. Thank you. So now let's put everything we've discussed into practice with a sensory break demonstration. So let's make this interactive. I encourage everyone to stand up and participate as I demonstrate these activities. This will help you get a feel for how they work and how you might incorporate them into your child's routine. So the idea here is to intentionally order sensory activities to promote regulation and help your child feel more balanced and focused. But I'm going to guide you through a quick and effective 5-minute sensory break using the theme of making applesauce. This demonstration will show you how combining different sensory activities can support self-regulation. So first, we'll start with some movement to engage the vestibular system. So stand up. Reach your arms high above your head. And then stretch them down to the floor. Pretend you are picking apples. I like to reach across my body and go down to the floor, just making sure that there is some eye movement and head rotation with it to provide input to the vestibular system. So really tune into the theme of picking apples. Maybe reach really high for that one really good apple. So ripe, so red. So you can repeat this a few times, and this movement again will help with spatial orientation and and balance. So next, let's move on to proprioception. Imagine you are stomping on the apples to mash them. So as you stomp, press your feet firmly into the ground. This pressure helps with body awareness and muscle feedback. And now let's move on to the tactile activity. Pretend to squeeze the apples to make applesauce. Feel the texture and pressure of your hands as you squeeze and manipulate the apples however you want. This helps again with that tactile input and sensory integration. And then finally, we'll incorporate respiration. So feel free to sit down if you want. Imagine blowing on the freshly made applesauce to cool it down. Take a deep breath in. And then exhale slowly as if you're blowing on the applesauce. You can do this a couple of times. This helps again with calming and self-regulation. And so by following these steps and engaging with different sensory systems, you can create a well-rounded sensory break that promotes regulation and can help your child manage their sensory needs more effectively. So again, feel free to adjust the activities based on what works best for your child. Let's wrap up this part of the presentation before Chris's concluding thoughts by talking about creating a sensory toolbox for your child. So a sensory toolbox is a personalized collection of tools and strategies designed to support your child's sensory needs and to help them manage their daily activities more effectively. So here's how to set one up. So first you have to create a toolbox. You have to design a space where your child can easily access their sensory tools. It can be a physical box like a shoebox, a drawer, or a special bag. You can include the essential tools, so equip the toolbox with items that cater to various sensory needs. Some suggested tools include a yoga ball, which is great for improving balance and core strength, a Bosu bump, which is great for balance, again, dynamic balance and stability activities, a weighted ball, which again provides calming proprioceptive input. You can roll it over your body. You can either throw it with a partner or you can squeeze it or just have it on your lap as for calming input. Like I showed earlier, some small bead fidgets or any kind of small fidget that is excellent for tactile stimulation and stress relief. This is one of my favorites. And then painter's tape. Painter's tape is one of my favorites too. It can be used to create organizing obstacle courses, breathing strips, which is right here to help trace your finger along to help with the breathing visual, or some visual boundaries whenever you're working in, let's say, the work environment with your child when they're doing homework. And then again, tailor it to your child's needs. Customize the toolbox based on their specific preferences or needs. That includes their sensory seeking or avoiding behaviors, and then incorporate activities. Plan how to use these tools during their daily activities or their sensory breaks. So for example, you can use the yoga ball during homework breaks, or you can play with the weighted ball before bed. And then regularly review the contents of the toolbox and update it to your child's needs as they change. And so with that being said, having a sensory toolbox can make a significant difference in supporting your child's sensory regulation and overall school experience. So I hope you found this information and the activities useful as you prepare for the new school year. I'm wishing you and your children a smooth transition back to school. Thank you so much for listening. I'll move it on to Chris.
So I know we're running late, folks, and I apologize about that. Thank you, Allie, and thank you, Samantha, for all of those great thoughts. So basically, I think what we're really recommending is looking at this transition into the school year as an opportunity to continue some of the balance and well-being that hopefully everybody got over the summer, but by tapping into some of the really interesting research on flow and executive functions, that's going to really help your student, your child, really be able to achieve the optimal progress over the course of this year. And of course, it's not all going to go smoothly and perfectly. There are going to be bumps in the road, but the more you're able to get back to a routine and a schedule, keep things organized, and make sure that they've got time for sleep and play and exercise, things are going to go pretty smoothly. All of these slides are going to be sent out to everybody that signed up today. So you'll have these slides. The next slide just gives some great references if you want to do some reading on your own. So there's the main reference for the book Flow. Some great books on executive functions, Smart but Scattered, Late, Lost, and Unprepared. And then the book that Allie mentioned, The Whole Brain Child by Dan Siegel and Tina Bryson is great as well. Does anybody have any questions? And again, I know we're running late, but if anybody has any questions, we can grab that.
I had a quick question for Samantha. What is the technology that you would recommend as it relates to smartphones and planners? So if your children have smartphones, we currently use Cozy, but I wasn't sure if there are better ones out there.
I don't have a great recommendation for you. I know that different families are using different things. I know some families have a lot of luck with instead of using planners at all, they're using things like calendars, and they're sharing calendars. I know I have some clients who really enjoy Skylight. is one that they're using. But there are a lot of different options out there, and they're constantly changing. Chris, I don't know if you've heard of any that you've heard are especially great for kind of managing that, but the technology is just, there's so much out there, and I think that a lot of companies are really realizing that families want this, and they're pushing hard. So I don't have any great recommendations. Chris, what do you think?
Yeah, I do have I actually have a good sheet that I don't have in front of me right now, but I can pull it out and we can include it as an attachment when the notes go out to everybody on, you know, some good technology resources for managing devices, but also for organizing and executive functions. I'll send that along. So great. All right, I'm going to wrap us up just because I'm sure we've all got other things to do, but thanks so much for tuning in. And please think about tuning in a couple weeks. The second Tuesday of every month at 10 o'clock, we'll be doing another presentation. And the next one is a broader analysis of flow led by Ethan Bork. So hope to see you guys then. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.